Welcome everyone to this webinar on the topic of personal and family finances in pandemic times. We are happy to host from Middle East University in Beirut, in Lebanon, this webinar for all the world actually. And tonight we have speakers from at least 3 different countries, from Lebanon, from Argentina, and from the United States. But I want to start by welcoming everyone who is attending this live streaming in the Facebook page of the university. I see that the number of attendees is growing as we start this webinar. I want to welcome each one of you who are attending from Lebanon or from other countries. I was reviewing the list of attendees a few minutes ago. We have 98 people who registered to attend the event, and I guess others will join who did not register. So welcome, each one of you. I want to start by mentioning that this is an effort of 3 organizations: the Faculty of Business from Middle East University, also the Business Club at Middle East University, and also we do it in collaboration with the Faculty of Economics and Administration of Universidad Adventista del Plata in Argentina, which in English would be River University. As we start, and it's our tradition at Middle East University, as we start all our events, we want to invite God to be with us, to be present, to be with us and to bless us in this webinar. So I want to offer a prayer to invite God to be with us. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the opportunity we have to learn from each other, to grow. Thank you for the gift of knowledge and of understanding that you have given us. And as we do this webinar tonight or during the day, depending on where each one of us is located, we want to invite you to be with us, to bless us with your presence, and that your wisdom, your light may be with each one of the panelists as they share this very important topic for every person, for every family, in these very difficult and challenging times that we are all going. We invite you and we thank you for the blessing of your presence and for the blessing of your light and your wisdom for our lives. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. I want to start by introducing my co-host tonight. She is Jessica Noon. She is the president of the Business Club at Middle East University, and we are working on this webinar together. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you, Dr. Carlos. Good afternoon, doctors, colleagues, friends, and family. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. Before we get started, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you who generously helped us make this event come together to become success. Doctors Carlos, Philippe, Adrian, and Joseph, actually we wouldn't be able to do this webinar without you. This webinar is full of interesting as well as exciting information. However, we are here today to discuss about the financial crisis, as well aware of the current economic difficulties that we're facing these months. This means that we need to get extra information and advices in order to know what and how to deal with these difficulties. Finally, I hope this webinar finds you well, and may God be present with us. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Nice to have you here with us. And I want to now introduce the panelists that we have for our webinar tonight. The first one I want to introduce is our local representative, Dr. Philippe Zgheib. Welcome, Philippe. How are you tonight?
Good evening, Carlos. Good evening, everyone. Doing fine, thank you, from Beirut.
You are located in Beirut.
We're going to share as best as we can, and may God be with all of us.
Let me give now a brief introduction of Dr. Philippe. He is a senior Fulbright scholar in business ethics, in startup entrepreneurship and strategic management. He holds a PhD in economics and a civil engineering doctorate from Utah State University in the USA. He has served actively in academia and in business practice since 1984, both in the USA and overseas. Dr. Zgheib is a widely established corporate consultant and executive business moderator with private corporations, both global and domestic. His current business research is specialized in the areas of business ethics, entrepreneurship, human resource management, and in business communications. His domestic and regional consulting expertise includes strategic management, innovation, leadership styles, conflict optimization, advanced negotiations, emotional intelligence, and crisis communications. In Lebanon, he has served over the last 25 years in full-time academic capacity at leading universities, including NDU, AUB, LAU. His academic university adjunct service in the USA includes Carnegie Mellon, Babson, Ohio North Central, Cleveland State, University of Pittsburgh, and Vanderbilt University. He is also a registered professional engineer in the USA and in Lebanon, and a project development leader. His public community services includes academic accreditation, audit, promotion of cooperatives, and strategic reform. Media exposure includes BBC World, CNN, Voice of America, and others. We are happy and honored to have you, Philippe, tonight with us. Jessica, please introduce Mr. Adrian Sekoto.
Yes, hello, Mr. Adrian. I hope everything is well.
Hello, nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you too.
I'm happy to be with you today from Argentina.
Welcome. So Mr. Adrian Sekoto has a degree in economics, and he is doing a master's in financial management. He is the Dean of the Faculty of Economics and Administration at Universidad Adventista del Plata, which is the River Plate Adventist University in Argentina. Adrian has been working in the education sector for 20 years with experience in academic management and in HR. He is currently professor of microeconomics and financial management. Since 3 years ago, he hosts a weekly radio column on economics and personal finance. Adrian has advised entrepreneurs and taught economics and finance seminars. He likes to undertake, teach, and help people to properly manage their finances. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian, for being with us today. I think
Thank
for
you
you
too.
right? It's noon in Argentina.
Yes, it's 12:45 right now in Argentina, and I'm happy to be with you sharing this webinar today.
Thank you so much. Our third panelist tonight is Dr. Joseph Rossen. Joseph, how are you and where are you located right now?
Good morning from Orlando, Florida. Good afternoon
Good
to
morning.
you. And you guys did this intentionally, starting at 11:30 through maybe 1:30. I hope you're going to provide lunch for me while I'm sitting here.
we can order a delivery for you, no worries.
Jessica, it's a pleasure to meet you. You know, I was reminiscing, 40 years ago, I was in your shoes in the same university. I went to Middle East College, as we used to call it back then, and now it's Middle East University. And I look at you and I'm very proud of all of you
Thank
there.
you.
Thank
Nice
you for
to meet you.
And if you're there in October, I'll come see you.
For sure.
I will introduce Dr. Rossen. He is the Vice President for Strategic Planning for Advent Health Corporate. Joseph started his career in healthcare with Florida Hospital in the year 2000. Before that, from 1989 to 2000, he was a professor of business and education at Atlantic Union College and then Southern Adventist University. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Middle East College, now Middle East University, as he just mentioned. So he is one of our alumnus. His Master of Business Administration in Healthcare Administration from Andrews University in Michigan, and his Doctorate of Education in Leadership from the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. Dr. Rossen is a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives. He is a member of the Board of Directors of Advent Health, the Land, and a member of the Board of the Finance Committee at Forest Adventist Church. Thank you for being with us, Joseph. As you mentioned already, you are in Orlando and you are missing your lunch. So thank you so much for fasting for us.
My pleasure.
I want to briefly introduce now the topic. As you all know, our dear attendants, the purpose of this webinar is to analyze the impact of this global pandemic, this crisis all over the world on personal and family finances. And we are going to look at it from three perspectives, or from three nations: Lebanon, Argentina, and the United States of America. So the panelists will try to answer these three questions. How are your and the people in your country, the personal and family finances of people in your country affected by the pandemic? What do you plan to do? What short-term, medium-term goals are you planning to cope with this economic crisis? And finally, what advice can you give to the audience? I want to let the audience know that after the three panelists present, we will have time for questions and answers. So we are going to be taking your answers, dear attendees, wherever you are. How are you going to post your questions? You need to post your questions as a comment down below the live streaming. And we will choose from there your questions. We also want you to greet us, to let us know from which countries you are joining us today. So right there as a comment, I am watching from Lebanon, or from Argentina, or from the US, or which countries are represented among the participants. Also, for those of you who chose to receive a certificate, the record of your attendance will be taken by liking, commenting, or sharing this live presentation from Facebook. So please do share or comment or like the presentation so we can record your attendance if you pay the certificate option. And also, I want to suggest, to create a larger audience and exposure for this event, that you can also share this live streaming as a watch party in your wall, in your personal wall, so all your friends can also participate with you. So let's go to our first presentation now. Our first panelist will be our representative from Lebanon, Dr. Philippe Zgheib. Welcome, Dr. Philippe. You can now open your microphone, and I will present here for all of us your presentation.
Good evening again, Carlos. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Is the connection clear? There we go.
Yes.
So I'm going to be looking at the economic impact of the virus pandemic, particularly on the socioeconomic conditions in Beirut, Lebanon. The exact title on the next slide. Household financial economics during COVID-19 pandemic lockdown in Lebanon. I've chosen to look at a dozen, more or less 12 different aspects of this lockdown, particularly affecting society in Lebanon. The next slide shows all 12 areas. The next slide could we move to the next slide? Carlos,
yes,
are you?
I moved already. There is a small delay, so it takes a few seconds since I moved to the next one till all of us see it.
So while we're looking at the various topics and sub areas of interest, the main message of this economic impact in Lebanon is the fact that the pandemic lockdown comes only as an aggravating circumstance to an already super critical context in Lebanese economics. A few months prior to the virus lockdown, we had a severe social breakdown in Lebanon at every level of society, particularly in politics, finance, banking, street demonstrations, protests, so that when the virus lockdown hit, already Lebanese society was under very dire circumstances of everyday living. Particularly to be noted is the overall macroeconomic situation. Our public debt of Lebanon has accumulated over decades and culminated recently to exceed about $100 billion worth, which is more than double the capacity of the economic volume of the country. That comes as a crippling factor to the public finances. Add to that the fact that the Lebanese currency, the Lebanese lira exchange rate with regards to the US dollar had systematically been pegged against the dollar at a fixed rate, which was almost artificial, and suddenly it came loose with regards to the dollar. And since most of the Lebanese economy is an import economy, this had a devastating effect on a ravaging superinflation that coincided just a few weeks prior to the virus pandemic lockdown. Add to that the fact that there were street demonstrations and semi-violent protests for weeks on end, also in October, November, leading into December. With this background, when the virus lockdown hit, already the Lebanese situation was super critical. So government was almost incapable of keeping up. We were in a transition phase between governments. One had resigned, another one was in the making, and the public treasury around New Year's, right at the peak of the breakdown of the pandemic, public treasury was declared bankrupt and insolvent. One main sector in the economy that was thought to be the strength of the Lebanese society was the banking sector. The banking sector had historically been a very strong and very healthy system, and suddenly it was hit with a severe shortage of hard currency. Most bank accounts in foreign currency were frozen, locked down, and there was a severe liquidity shortage on the Lebanese currency, which resulted into almost a rundown on the banks. A paradox of this situation is that the pandemic provided some breathing space to the banks, because now the pandemic forced them to shut down, which relieved some of the pressure of the depositors' panic. In the meantime, new rules of access to liquidity are being established. However, they still are constraining the economy and constraining everyday living. There are two other very powerful sectors of Lebanese economy that have also come under severe impact. One is the education sector, which has always been a pride of the Lebanese society, and the other one has been tourism. Both of those, among others, were severely impacted by the lockdown. Let me look at them one by one. The slide that's shown now, okay, the banking and exchange rates resulted in severe unemployment. I'll discuss unemployment again. Let me come back to education. Then I'll come back to healthcare. Okay. All right, and the sequence of the slides is
Philippe?
That would be slide number 9.
What is the title?
Education.
Yes.
There we go. There we go. Under education, we recognize in Lebanon two main sectors of education, the public sector and the private sector. Invariably, the private sector leading the quality education system. However, both sectors, public and private, have come under severe stress due to the pandemic. Public sectors, schools and universities were overwhelmed by the sudden demand for online technology. Most of them were not ready for it, are not even equipped. On the private education system side, the distress came from financial distress and unknown financial circumstances, where cash flow both into the school system and out of the school system almost came to a complete halt. At the same time, the Lebanese education system organizes at the end of every academic year national official exams, which would usually be happening at around this time of the year in June. And those now are still uncertain of whether or not they will happen and how they will happen and under what conditions candidates will successfully be considered having completed those exams or not. So the education system also has come under quite a severe impact of the pandemic. The next sector is the tourism and transportation sector. There we go, travel and tourism. The Beirut airport, which is the only international airport in the country, came under sudden and complete shutdown, which is quite dramatic for a country like Lebanon that has more of its citizens living outside the borders of the country than it has citizens inside the country. the shutdown of the airport brought a severe lockdown on communication and movement of the people and flow of funds. At the same time, domestic tourism came to a full halt due to restrictions on movement and travel. Public events, most activities were suspended, and historically successful hospitality institutions such as hotels, restaurants, festivals have completely shut down. Some of them are temporarily suspended. Many of them are completely shut down. Furthermore, I come back to the unemployment. This combined effect of tourism, education, banking has brought a severe increase of unemployment. The numbers that are being published are in excess of 40% unemployment. That would be extremely severe and resulting in dire poverty levels. Unemployment is either complete or partial as of underemployment in most sectors of the economy. Businesses as well as public agencies and institutions are operating either on half capacity or under half capacity. Some of them, as I mentioned, also have gone into complete shutdown. I can give a couple of examples. Lebanon produces its own cement, which is a generator of the construction industry. Cement factories are completely shut down. Also, main hotels that have been in operation for decades also have come under shutdown, this shutdown also is affecting schools, plants, factories, private and public. Resulting from this, the immediate effect is a psychosocial distress at the family level. I'll come to the healthcare later. The psychosocial distress that has resulted from forcing individuals and families into a standstill, locked space, results in petty crime, excesses of family violence, general feelings of disorientation, depression, etc. This has shown on children, university age students, parents, especially that it all came suddenly without any prior expectation and capacity to adjust to this new mode of living. Regarding the healthcare system, here the impact is mitigated. The healthcare system, particularly in Lebanon, has seen a decline of preventive healthcare services, where critical care, emergency care has had to absorb all of the available capacity of the healthcare system. Now, as in education, healthcare in Lebanon is partly public, partly private. Both public and private institutions came under severe pressure, whether in the public sector as a result of lack of capacity, and in the private institutions as a result of financial pressure and survival and sustainability concerns. The insurance industry overall has not kept pace it is still uncertain as to what would be supporting the medical system or not. Okay, healthcare, great. Let me move on towards everyday living in terms of food and necessities. The bulk of Lebanese consumer commodities is imported. Therefore, it's paid for with hard currency. Given that there was already a severe shortage of hard currency liquidity, the nature of consumer commodities that are now available to consumers has dramatically changed. So the trend is towards more local household production and less imported consumer goods. Actually, the ratio of import to export of Lebanese economy is about 7-to-1, which makes Lebanese prices in light of the dramatic collapse of the exchange rate of the lira, it makes prices escalate dramatically many folds. That is resulting in either incapacity to provide wholesale volume of commodities or a shortage at the retail level. Therefore, there is a gradual but very insufficient shift to informal household agro production to more classic and more traditional lifestyle of everyday survival skills. As a result, if I may jump to the last slide, after food, we have an uncertainty of how this is going to evolve. I raise 4 concerns. The new social norm of adapting to the distancing and the behavior. Are we accepting the presence of the virus and the new social norms, or are we tired of it? And both of these have contradictory effects on the progression of the pandemic lockdown. Is a vaccine a hope or a dream? It stays uncertain and unknown whether there will be a second wave and how will the next wave and the next school year look like. Returning to normal economy, will that occur under a closed border system, or again back to an open border system, which to Lebanon is a dire necessity, because Lebanon is heavily dependent in its everyday living and its economy on its connections with the outside world. And finally, the net Lebanese presence worldwide, whether it's a human presence or a financial presence, is the net effect an inflow or an outflow? Both are uncertain. Back to the starting point, there is a severe shortage of liquidity in cash prior to the pandemic. The pandemic is making it more severe as an aggravating factor. So even as the pandemic washes away, we will still be asking ourselves the question, will the economic system survive? Will our banking system survive? Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Philippe. Thank you for showing us the issues in Lebanon, which are much beyond the pandemic because of the economic and political situation that Lebanon is facing from last year. I want to acknowledge the attendees and their countries, and they are posting here in Facebook. We have people from Lebanon, from Loma Linda, California, more people from Lebanon, people from Argentina, people from Lebanon and Syria. There is a person from Cairo, Egypt, attending the webinar. There is another person from Mexico. Welcome each one of you. And I see also there are some questions for the panelists that people are posting here. We will keep them for the end. After the three panelists present, then we will share your questions and they will answer you. So please post here in a comment in the Facebook below the live streaming any question you want to ask the panelists. Jessica, you want to greet the attendees?
I want to say welcome to all of you. Thank you for being part of this webinar. And I hope that you'll find solution for your pandemic times. And that's it.
Thank you, Jessica. We will now move to our second panelist. Adrián Secotto will share with us what is the situation in South America, especially in the country of Argentina.
Okay, thank you, Carlos, Charlie, as I know you. Let me share my screen, the presentation. Okay, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, perhaps I can begin the presentation showing the situation in South America. I will put in context how the pandemic finds us in South America and in Argentina. As you can see in the picture in the left, you can see the spots, the red spots, that means the total cases that we have in South America, especially Brazil, Peru, Chile, Colombia, and Ecuador. They have the highest number of cases in South America. And in the right map, the right picture, you can see the active cases. As you can see, especially Peru and Bolivia and Ecuador, they have many cases because they didn't go to a hard lockdown as we did it in Argentina, for instance, and we have just few cases and a very small number of people died for COVID-19, and so the situation is very different in the different countries that we have in South America. Especially Brazil is the country that has the highest number of dead people from COVID right now. And according to the IMF, this map we can see from the April outlook, World Economic Outlook, in Latin America and Caribbean, the IMF expect that we have a fall in the real GDP for about 5% this year, but they are adjusting their forecast every month. So it's probably we will have another fall in the GDP the next month. So it's a very difficult situation for South America because we come from many years with GDP falling in the different countries, especially in Argentina. The pandemic finds us in a very difficult situation because we are in a recession right now, 2 years recession in 2018, 2019, and this year the pandemic finds us in a very difficult situation. New government, but the new government has a real difficult situation with very high debt, inflation, and many other problems in fundamentals that I will show you later. So the context is very difficult for all the countries in South America, especially Argentina, Brazil, and Venezuela is a very different situation. But as you can see in the pictures, the expected GDP is going to fall, and it's falling in some countries from some years. In the picture on the left, you can see how every country in South America and Latin America and Caribbean reacted to the pandemic. Some countries increased their spending in government expenditures, and especially Peru, Brazil, Chile, they use a big fiscal package to face the pandemic. And as you can see in the next pictures, the real GDP in South America, according to the power purchasing parity, is going to fall, and it is expected that in the next 2 or 3 years we're going to reach the highest level that we had in 2015. So it is perhaps another lost decade. We had a lost decade in the 80s because the real GDP fell, and it took 10 years to return to the same level before the falling, and it's going to happen again, the same situation after the peak on 1915 or 1914, 1915. We're going to have about 10 years that the real GDP in South America and Caribbean is not going to go high, but it's going to fall and return to the same path, the same level, and it's going to take 10 years. So this is a very interesting situation because we are in a very, we have countries that produces a lot of commodities, and we have a very, very active production system, but we have a very difficult problem with, especially with debts. So it's taking us into a consistent cyclical situation when we go to the top and then we fall in a hard fall, and we return to another top in the cycle, and it's taking many years to reach the level that we had in the previous years. So in South America, we have a very difficult situation with, especially with debts. We have countries with debts very, very high, especially in Argentina. And in the last 3 years, our government took a lot of debt from the IMF and some other institutions. And we're right now in in a default. We're going to see right now. We're in a default, and this is affecting our fundamentals too, because when you are facing a default, and we're facing the number 10 default, we're in the 10th default, and this is not normal. Everything in the country is affected by that situation. You know, prices, real interest, the exchange rate, GDP, etc. Everything is affected by the situation, because we depend from inflows and the money that comes from another countries in debt or in the form of investments, and people don't come to countries where they have when they don't pay their debts. Okay, so it's a situation that put us on in a way, in a situation that we don't have confidence in the face of the other institutions, banks, and investors. The context continue to be difficult, because the impact in the left picture, you can see the impact that the real GDP is having in different countries like Peru, Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, during the lockdown. Since the beginning of February, March, we have a very hard lockdown in South America, especially in Argentina and some other countries. And the situation went worse, because the lockdown implied that every business had to close, and we were not producing. And especially in countries where mostly the big majority of people that they work in the informal market. They go outside the government help, so they will not have many help from the government. So they depend on their day-to-day work. So when in the lockdown, in the hard lockdown, nobody can go out from their houses, and people couldn't work, and the situation in the families went worse. So according to the IMF, you can see in this picture, in Argentina, the fiscal spending, it's about to be for almost 5% of the GDP, and we're having a budget that it's a negative budget. So the government is printing a lot of money, because we don't have enough money coming from commerce and from investments. So right now, our government is using the monetary policy, especially to finance the fiscal expenditures that they're having. So in a situation with very high inflation, the printing that they're taking, they almost double the monetary base right now. It doesn't seem to be a good projection for the inflation rate. So we are expecting a very high inflation rate for the next month. And of course, as you can see in this picture, this is the inflation history in Argentina. The peak in 1991, when we have hyperinflation, And then we went to a situation with deflation in 2001. And then we began with inflation rates coming to a higher and higher percentages. Right now, the last year, we have 53%, and for this year, we're expecting a 45%. But as I said, according to the path that the monetary policy is taking, perhaps this will be adjusted to a higher number. Another fundamental that we are always looking is the exchange rate. Right now, we have different exchange rates. We have the official exchange rate that is about 71 right now, 71 pesos for $1. That is the main currency that we look for. And the exporters, they receive only 44, almost 45 pesos for dollar, about 30% less than the official rate, because the government imposed a tax, a retention for the exporters. And but by the as we call the dollar bolsa, that is the dollar that you can buy in the market, in the financial market, you can sell and buy dollars for about 120 pesos. It's about 70% more than the official rate. So we have four or five different exchange rates right now. And when you have so many different rates, this is a situation that it's not good for investors and for the people that need to fix their prices. And you don't know if you can buy dollars the next month. The government is putting restrictions on buying and selling. So the dollar, that is a price that we take as a mirror. It's very difficult to find only one price that is a reference for the whole economy. So we have four prices right now in the dollar. Yeah, the other fundamental that makes a difference in Argentina is the prices of the exported goods, especially commodities, because we depend on commodities, especially agro commodities. And for the last 5 years, the prices were falling. Right now, as you can see in the picture on the right, prices are falling, and in a context where we depend on the prices of the commodities that comes from exports. If you have prices falling, the expectation is that you will not have enough money in the future. So this is another variable that is putting restrictions to the government. The evolution of the gross product in Argentina, as you can see in this picture, is expected to fall more than the IMF projected in April. The IMF projected about a fall in the real GDP for about 5.5%. But right now, some institutions are expecting that the fall in the real GDP could be worse, almost the double. So, as you can see, the gross product is falling. We have as you can see, since 2011, there was almost no growth in the real GDP. We are in a situation that is the GDP is moving in a lateral way, and since 2017 started to fall. And for this year, not only the total GDP, but the GDP by person, by per capita, it's expected to fall very hard. And this situation puts another restriction on family finances in the household situation, and it's putting a very hard restriction, especially with people that are losing their jobs. They cannot work enough. It's going to be very hard for them, for these people in the next months, perhaps next 1 or 2 years. As I said, we're in a default. The blue line that you can see in this picture is the total, the net international reserves that the central bank in Argentina has. It's been falling since 2018, when the exchange rate in Argentina went from 18 pesos to 42, 44 pesos, more than double in a few months. And since 2018 and right now, as we saw, we have another devaluation, very hard devaluation. And if you take from the number of since 2018, the beginning of 2018, we were paying about 18 pesos for a dollar. And right now, if you go to the financial markets, you can pay almost 120 pesos. It's more than 500, almost 600 increase in the exchange rate. So we have a very hard devaluation in the last 2 or 3 years. So it's affecting the international reserves that the central bank has. As you can see, they began to fall. But in the context that the government took a lot of debt to finance that outflow from the central bank. And we are right now in the second default. Next Monday, last Monday, we enter into another default with the Paris Club. We had to pay them, but we didn't have the money, so we didn't officially say that we're in default, but we said we are negotiating, and we had the second default. The first one was in 22 May, and right now we have the second default with the Paris Club. And investors, they already declared that we're in default, and they trigger the CDS that they had for about $1.5 billion because we had to pay only interest in May, and we didn't. So we are negotiating right now our debts, but in a situation that we are not officially declared in default. The fiscal situation, as you can see, as a percentage of the gross product, it's a situation that is not good because, as you can see, we had in the last 20 years a default in 2001, 2013, 14, and right now another default. But the situation is not easy for Argentina because we had a negative result in our fiscal balances. According to this graphic, you can see that in the last 4 governments, the last 4 presidents that we had, the 4 of them, they had negative balances in the fiscal results. And in terms of real GDP and in percentage of real GDP, they took a peek on here. The worst situation was in 2015, then recovered a little, but right now we are increasing our negative situation compared to the GDP. As I said before, investors, they don't want to come to a country where you will not be paid and you will have restrictions. Right now, for instance, banks, the government put a restriction to them. They cannot distribute their earnings. So the dividends, they cannot pay for this year dividends. So this took a very hard punch to the banks, and of course the banks that negotiate in the market, the prices fall very hard, and they're having very difficult situations right now. So this graph shows the gross investment, internal gross investment, fixed gross investment in Argentina. As you can see, in the last 10 years, we almost didn't have enough investments in Argentina, and since October, as the outflows increase in Argentina, it took the same path with the gross investment, the fixed gross investment. So there's no people trying to make businesses in Argentina right now. Since the beginning of the lockdown, we have, especially in the last 2 months, a very sharp fall in the industrial production and the construction. The construction sector is the one that normally moves the economy, and the industrial production shows how the country is working. And we have, with the hard lockdown, a very sharp fall in the industrial production index and the industrial and the construction index. Another graph that shows that the fiscal situation is worse, the one in the right, you can see the red bars represents the difference between incomes and expenditures for the government, and it's increasing according to the last numbers that we have from the government. As you can see, the industrial production, the worst situation is with the cars and all the derivatives market. They fall about 89% according to the last numbers in April. Everything related to transportation, clothing, some other industries like minerals, metal, mechanic, everything related to metal, tobacco, textile. They went very sharp. They have a very sharp fall in the last month since the lockdown in March began. And according to that situation, some surveys shows that household finances are getting worse, because if you think that we were having 2 years in recession, and we're having another year right now with a very hard situation, and the recession increasing and going hard with no industrial production, no construction, services. We have a very interesting situation there, because when the lockdown started, we have many people that made their work like a service outside business how do you say, in businesses, they are independent people, so they couldn't work. So what did the people do? According to a survey, 80% of the people got indebted. So they increased their debts because they couldn't pay many services and taxes, especially. Almost 50% of their debts are outside the system, the banking system. So they are taking debts from family, from services, from the government, from personal debts, and they're going into a harder situation, because they are increasing their debts, and with lower incomes and higher debts, the expectations are not good for these families. For instance, if 46% didn't pay their taxes, 18% didn't pay their house rents, and almost half of the debts that people have with banks, it's with credit cards. And we know that credit cards are the more expensive debts that you can take. So if I can give an advice to people, don't get in debts with credit cards. In Argentina, for instance, you pay almost 60% in an annual rate in credit cards, but you can have only 30% in an investment in a bank. So this is a very high price that you pay when you get in debts with credit cards. I made a survey last week, and according to some results, for instance, almost 2/3 of the family found that their incomes went lower, and more than 50%, almost 60% of the people that respond to the survey, they found that their expenses went lower too. And it's interesting, but because this means that people adjusted their expenses according to their incomes too. Since the lockdown began, almost 80% of the respondents said that they adjusted their expenses to the new situation, and some people had to take their savings to pay their expenses, and more people than before said that they made almost more. They bought more online than they used to do that, and especially the expenses went to food. But they bought specific food, not everything. The way they structured the expenses in food changed either. According to this graph, you can see that this graph says that people decided not to pay, or they couldn't pay some expenses. And as you can see, the number one expenditure that they decided to postpone or not to pay or eliminate from the structure of expenses that they have is clothing. Clothing is the number one item that they decided to postpone or not to, or to eliminate from their structure of expenses. The other one is oil or gas, as you can see, for cars and mobiles, and the other one is a video cable. And many people said that they didn't have to postpone. So perhaps the people that answered the survey, it's people that have a good standard of living, they have good incomes. The other result that we can see is that almost 70% of the people say that after the lockdown, after the pandemic, they will have their finances worse than before the lockdown. Almost 40% that says that they will have a small fall in their finances, and almost 30% says they will have a great fall in their finances. But if you take both groups, you have almost 70% of people that says that they will be worse after the lockdown than before the lockdown. And it's interesting because I asked that, how do you manage your finances? Do you usually make a budget? Do you usually take detailed registration of incomes and expenses? And 67% says that yes, they make their budgets, and almost 69% says that they always take a detailed registration of their incomes and taxes. So these people, the people that answer the survey, it looks like they are people that used to take care of their finances. But the same people says that the credit card is the number one debt that they have. It's interesting because almost every survey shows that people take a lot of debt with credit cards. And as I said, credit card, it's a very expensive debt everywhere in the world, but especially in Argentina. So perhaps we need to take care more on that situation. The other one is the personal credits with the banks, and the blue one is the housing credits that people are taking. So how can I imagine the future? I take that picture because we in Argentina decided to take care of the COVID-19, so we didn't have a lot of people that died, and we have very few people with contagions, and they are very careful about the health situation. But as you can see, recession and economics and finances, it's going behind the COVID wave, and it's a higher wave. It's a very big wave that is going to give us a hard time for the perhaps 2 years, not only 1 year, 2 years. For the next 2 years, we're going to have a very hard situation in Argentina. So the expectations for people in Argentina are not good. The government they are taking some measures that they're not giving to the investors a good return and a good image of the way they are going to go. The other day, the government expropriated a business from a very old enterprise in Argentina, an old business in Argentina, and they decided to take it away because they said that it was good for the country and for the sovereignty of the food in Argentina. So they are sending, they are not sending good news to investors and to the rest of the world. So I think that we're going to have very, very difficult times for the next 1 or 2 years. So according to the numbers, we're in a recession in Argentina, and we're going to have a recession for the whole year and perhaps part of the next year. So this is the situation right now in South America and in Argentina, and I'm able to answer questions when you think that it would be necessary.
Thank you, Adrian, for showing us the situation in
Thank you so much.
Now here of the questions that the attendees are posting in Facebook. We have questions for Argentina, for Lebanon, quite a number of questions, and then a couple of general questions. So please, attendees, continue writing your questions and we will take them after the third presentation. Also, I want to acknowledge some people are saying we are watching from Maryland in the United States. Welcome. Another person from Florida in the United States. Welcome each one of you. We are going to move now to our third panelist, Dr. Joseph Rossen. He is joining us from the city of Orlando in the United States. Share with us the situation in the United States, please.
Thank you, Carlos. Pleasure to be with you. So, you know, I listened to my two colleagues talking about the situation in, you know, Carlos, I will share it myself. Don't put me up here. I will do it. Let me talk a little bit and then I will do it from my end. You can hear me okay, right?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you. I will cancel then my presentation.
Thank you. So I listened to my two colleagues here on the panel talking about the big picture, and I changed my presentation a little bit to adjust, if you will, and I did that on the fly. I felt that instead of focusing on the things I cannot control, I'm going to try to focus on the things that I have some control over. But before I do that, let me give you a picture about what's happening here in the United States. I call it the perfect storm in the US. I call it a trifecta. So you have an economic issue, you have a COVID-19 issue, and you have a social unrest issue. And I joke with my friends here that sometimes I watch MTV or LBCI, the Lebanese news stations, and I have to remind myself that I am not watching Lebanon, I am watching the US when I watch the news. Because it's very similar topics that you guys in Lebanon are discussing regarding the economy, regarding COVID-19, and regarding the social unrests you are having that we are facing here in the United States. Let me talk a little bit about the economy here in the US. Today or yesterday, it was officially announced that we are in a recession in the United States. The longest economic expansion in history, 128 consecutive months almost 11 years, 10 and a half years, ended in February. And for the first time in all these years, over 10 years, a decade plus, we have a negative GDP. And we are in a recession. And then COVID-19 came, and COVID-19 exacerbated the issue. So COVID-19 did not come to the US in terms of economic impact until the middle of March. So February and the beginning of March was business as usual in the US, but the middle of March and on, COVID-19 hit big. As of today, well, there is nothing as of today. As of yesterday, confirmed 2 million cases in the US. Just let that number sink in a little bit. 2 million confirmed COVID-19 positive cases. If you do the math, this is like 6 per 1,000. So 6 per 1,000 US citizens have contracted the COVID-19 virus. Compare that to Lebanon, it is 0.3 per 1,000. So you guys in Lebanon are blessed when it comes to the COVID-19, at least, nothing else but COVID-19. And of the 2 million cases that are confirmed in the US, there is 114,000 deaths. And that equals to about 57 per 1,000, compared to about 18 per 1,000 in Lebanon. So the percent deaths in the United States is about 3 times higher than what you have in Lebanon. And the confirmed cases, positive cases, are 20 times higher than what has been confirmed in Lebanon so far. We have an issue here. It's a public health issue. And as a result, the economy has suffered immensely. I can tell you the company I work for, we are a $11 billion company, 80,000 employees. And we are expecting a loss this year of about $1 billion. That's a big amount of dollars to be talking about. And then I said there's a trifecta. So I talked about the economy and COVID-19. And the third thing that came up in the United States the past few weeks is the social unrests that you have heard about in Lebanon, because I've been watching it on Lebanese news channels. The social unrest in America is real. People are fed up with certain things, and you have demonstrations all over the country. In Orlando, in New York, in many other places, Los Angeles, Atlanta, you name it. I don't know if there is a place of any significance in the United States today that is not having protests and demonstrations. So between the economy, COVID-19, and social unrest, we have the perfect storm. And none of them is about to end. So the economy, the downturn in the economy is now starting. The COVID-19 is only 3-4 months into it, and we do not know when the end is going to be. As earlier was mentioned, I work in healthcare, and we have about 40 hospitals across the nation here. And we see COVID-19 cases every day, and we run out of, I cannot walk in my office today without wearing a mask. So masks are, if I'm in my office, I'm fine, but when I exit my office, even to go to the bathroom, I have to put a mask on. Before I enter Before I enter my building here, my office building, I have to go through 3 stations. First of all, I have to enter, then there is a sanitizing station, I have to sanitize my hands. Then the next station, I have to pick up a mask, I have to put the mask on. And the third station, I have to stand in front of a machine to take my temperature. And if the machine says I'm clear, I proceed to the 4th station, and the 4th station gives me this little bracelet here, a hand, a wrist thing to put on my hand, on my wrist. And the color changes every day, so they don't want us to cheat. So today it's an orangey color. Tomorrow it may be blue, black. I don't know what color they use. So that's the new life that we live in America today. And there is no end in sight. And the social unrest has been simmering for many, many years, and now it exploded. It's not the first explosion we have in social unrest in America, but it is the most recent one. And this one is not going away, is not dying. So how do you live? How do you cope with a pandemic? I mean, the topic of this whole session is personal family finance during a pandemic. Well, we have problems, and the two individuals from Lebanon and Argentina highlighted the major issues we have in both countries and the world, and I gave you a little glimpse about what the US is facing. Well, to be honest with you, I have no idea how do you live through a pandemic. I mean, do we really have experience in that? How many pandemics have we lived through for us to learn from? The most recent one that anybody can remember in history books is in 1918. Well, who was alive in 1918? I mean, not even our parents were alive in 1918. We just hear about the Spanish flu back in 1918, lasted 2 years. Lots of people died and suffered, but no one today can remember that period. So I thought I'll share with you, how do you cope with economic downturns, whether the economic downturn is caused by a social unrest, whether it is caused by a pandemic like COVID-19, or whether it is caused by stupid government policy like we have in Lebanon that caused the economy to crash in the country. And I'm not telling you that our government in the US is much smarter, but so far the economy is holding okay here. Although as of yesterday or last Friday, I should say, unemployment has recorded 13% in the United States. That is also a very significant number. It is way below the 20% that was projected, but 13% is not something to go over lightly. In fact, it is probably one of the highest unemployment rates we have had since 2008, 2009. And I don't believe in 2008, 2009, we even reached 13%, but we were close to that. So let me talk to you now. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to talk to you now about how do you prepare for economic downturns. And you don't prepare for economic downturns. Tell me if you can see what I'm sharing with you.
Yes, I can.
So how do you prepare? I mean, this is not just a pandemic thing. It can happen anytime. I lived in Lebanon during the war in 1975-76. I left the country in 1982. And I lived through those difficult times. And my parents stayed, and they lived through many years after 1982 in the country. Now, should we have an emergency fund? Should a family have an emergency fund? Do we have an emergency fund? Do we even plan on unemployment? How much do we save? Do we save monies from the earnings we make, or do we spend everything we have? How do I protect my assets, and what kind of loans I should have, or should I even have loans to start with? There is something that I like to use here, the 50-30-20 rule. So remember, preparing for a pandemic or preparing for an economic life in a pandemic does not happen when the pandemic hits. It happens way before. You have to be prepared for that. So I told you, for example, that we are expecting in our company, we are expecting about $1 billion behind budget for 2020. Well, so far, thank God, knock on wood, and let's hope we can sustain that, we have not laid off anybody. We have kept our 80,000 employees whole. Our commitment to our employees has been very strong. And the reason we were able to do that is because we have built a very strong balance sheet. And the strong balance sheet that we have was not built starting in March of 2020. It started about 15 years ago, working on that, on strengthening the balance sheet in order to be able to survive a day like today. Nobody planned on a day like today. You don't plan on a day like today. But in the back of your mind, you need to have a plan that starts way before a situation like this takes place. So this is the 50-30-20 rule. Look at that 20%. I call it savings. And under savings, you have emergency fund, retirement account, long-term goals, whatever you want to put there. The question is, how often do I take out 20% of every dollar I make and put it on the side for a rainy day, or for retirement, or for whatever the situation might be? I'm going to walk you through these 5 different building blocks, if you will, that are what I would call is pandemic-proof financial stability, economic downturn financial stability. One, it's interesting to note that in the United States, about 3/4 of the people here in America are living paycheck to paycheck. Now, you are talking about probably the richest country on planet Earth. And 3/4 of our citizens are living paycheck to paycheck. When they get their paycheck, they live on it. And if they don't get the paycheck next week, or if they get paid bi-weekly, they don't have enough funds to continue. 3/4 of us are living like that. 69% of Americans have less than $1,000 in the bank. And 34% have nothing in savings at all. Can you imagine those numbers in the richest country on planet Earth? That almost 3/4, not quite, above 2/3 of the population have less than $1,000 in their bank account. So that is a problem. And if you are in that category, if you are in the 69% of individuals that have less than $1,000 in your bank account, you are in trouble. Forget the pandemic, forget social unrest, forget an economic downturn, you're in trouble. So you have to be able to discipline yourself in such a way that you're able to save whatever you are able to save and not spend every penny you make. How do you do that? You have to look at your personal expenses. If you are not evaluating your personal expenses and maintaining a budget, you're not going to be able to succeed and thrive. In America, statistics show, or surveys show, that 41% of US adults establish and maintain a budget. 41%, less than half. You know, my son was in high school. Actually, before he was in high school, he was in elementary school when I put him on a budget. I outlined to him what his expenses are. Now, he did not pay for his food and clothing and things like that. However, if you want to have a cell phone, you're paying for that cell phone. And if you want to take a girl out on a date, you're paying for that date. And if you wish to go visit your friend and drive my car, you're paying for the gas in that car. Now, I didn't charge him for any personal expenses, obviously. It's my obligation to do that. But anything beyond that, he had to do. Now, that was in elementary school. Guess what happened in high school? When he got to high school, he did not want to be, he was like 15, 16 by then. He didn't want to be dependent on me or coming to me to ask me for $10 for this and $10 for that. He went and found a job and he worked part-time. And in college, he worked part-time because he knew daddy will pay for college tuition, for his living expenses, for everything he needs. But daddy will not pay for taking a girl out or pay for gas in the car or pay for going on vacation or with his friends or whatever it is. So he found a job and he put himself on a budget. And until today, he's a lawyer and living on his own. He's independent and he makes enough money that he doesn't need me anymore, thank God. I got a raise once he got a job. He now has a budget and he lives on it. But only 41% of us in America have a budget. Look at the investing in retirement. Most Americans don't have much money put on the side for retirement. So what happens when you stop working? So think of yourself in Lebanon. I remember my father always telling me he wants to retire at the age of 55. And I never understood what that means. I was a kid back then. And he did retire at the age of 55. But he did put enough money on the side. In Lebanon, as you probably know, there is no social security and there is no safety net and there is no money coming to him from other places. So he had to save money on the side. And that's what he did. He saved enough money so he was able to retire at the age of 55. It is something that I have not succeeded in doing. I always said I'm going to retire at 55 because dad retired at 55. I can't do that. It's not for me to live the life I need to live and to live within the budget I have created for myself. I have to work at least until the age of 60, which is 5 years longer than what my father did. He planned his retirement better than I planned my retirement, if you will. Interestingly enough, When I left Lebanon in 1982, my father came to me and he gave me a bank book, you know, the bank statement from Federal Bank of Lebanon. I don't even know if they exist anymore. He gave me that thing, and in it there was about $6,000–7,000 US. And I said, "What's that?" He said, "That's your money." I said, "What do you mean it's my money?" He said, "Well, I've been putting $100 here, $100 there since you were born in this account, and here's what's in it now. And I never spent it, and now it's yours." Now imagine, you know, the good feeling I had when he gave me that bank statement, and now I know I have this amount of money in the bank, and back then I didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. The point is, you know, 39% of America, you know, savings for retirement started in their 20s. You have to start in your 20s. If you don't start in your 20s, it is very difficult to catch up in the future. So if I learned one thing from my father or my parents is that start saving early. You don't start saving when you are in your 40s and 50s. You will have a lot to catch up after that. Another example I give you about saving early. I told you my son is a lawyer today. He's 28 years old. So he went to college when he was 18, and college in America is not cheap. I don't know how it compares to to Lebanon college tuition, but it's not cheap here. From the day he was born in 1991, I put on the side $200 a month. And every Christmas, I would add $100. So to make it $2,500 a year. So every year, I put $2,500 on the side in a mutual fund account, and I forgot about it. When he turned 18, I had what is needed for his university tuition and more. I mean, I even had almost twice as much as what was needed to pay his tuition and expenses. But it took 18 years to build that fund. Now, $200 a month may be little to some people, maybe too much for some people. Okay, put $50 a month. Over 18 years, that amount builds up, and you will have much more than if you were to sleep on it, put it under a mattress, or spend it, or put it in a savings account. If you invest that amount, you will get significant return on it. And then you have to start to protect your assets. So if you have a house, if you have a car, you have to think about, so what kind do you need to buy insurance? And I don't know how this applies to Lebanon. I'm talking here in the US. Do you have enough insurance to cover the damage if you, God forbid, if you have a fire or something happens in your house, which is usually the major investment a person has in their lifetime. So you want to protect that investment. The message here is that building a pandemic-proof financial stability does not start when the pandemic starts. It starts when you are in your teens. It starts when you are in college. I used to work when I was in Lebanon. I lived in Burj Hamoud, and I used to work in a cocktail place, a juice cocktail place. I can't remember now, somewhere in Iraq, that area. We used to squeeze oranges and make cocktails or whatever it is. I was maybe 15, 16 years old, and I was working. My father never asked me to work. I didn't need to work, but I worked in order to pay for my personal expenses and to have a few dollars on the side, a few liras back then on the side, to take care of things that I need to do. So the message to young people, especially college students today, Jessica, I hope you're listening. I think Jessica, yes, Jessica knew. I hope you're listening. You guys need to start preparing for financial stability from today. You cannot even wait until after you finish college. And it really doesn't matter if you put on the side $50 a month, not more than that. Just put $50 a month on the side. And over the years, you will see how that thing will become significantly more than when you started. So if you remember nothing from what I said, I wrote down a few rules to remember. Plan ahead and plan early. Develop a budget and adjust it over time. The budget can never be fixed. It has to be adjusted over time. Sometimes you add more, sometimes you add less. I drilled into my son's head that he has to put 15% of his income into his retirement fund from today. And he's been doing that since he started working about 3 years ago. I said, I don't care. Before you eat, you take 15% of every paycheck you get and you put it in this retirement fund. Well, Daddy, I'm only 25, 24. Who cares about retirement now? No, you care. Because retirement will come before you know it. And that's what he's been doing. It becomes a habit. So before you even eat, before you take care of your basic expenses, you take 15% out and put it in that retirement fund. And you forget about it for the next 30, 40 years until you are ready to use it. You have to plan for emergencies. I told you earlier in the 50-30-20 rule is that 20% needs to go to savings. Some of it goes to retirement, obviously. In fact, most of it will go to retirement. But you have to have an emergency fund. A rule of thumb, we say, you need to have at least 3 months' income in your savings account. So whatever your living expenses are, if you need $1,000 a month, you need to have a minimum of $3,000 in your savings bank account in case of an emergency, in case you lose your job, in case there's a closure of the country like we have today, in case of whatever. Now, 3 months is the minimum. For me, it's 2 years. If I don't have 2 years of funds sitting in the account, 2 years income, I cannot sleep at night. I mean, I worked hard over the past 30 years to build that. It didn't happen over 1 year. And that's the plan for emergencies, because planning for emergencies, again, doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to do that. And then we have to plan on children's education. Many of you young people will be married, will have children, and then you have to worry about that education. You have to plan on that. I gave you the example of what I personally did with my son when he was born with the $200 a month I put on the side. And then, guys, Lebanon has changed. I don't know what's happening in Lebanon. America is a country of debt, and Lebanon is not far behind that anymore, it seems. It used to be in the old days when I was there in the 70s. You have money, you buy a car. You don't have money, you ride a bike. And if you don't have money, you walk. But you don't go borrow money to buy a bike or borrow money to buy a car. It's what you had. I told you I lived in Burj Hamoud. I used to walk to the college. Now, those of you who know the geography and the region, you know it's not a short distance. I walked. I had a couple people that went to school at the same time with me in the same class. I used to pick them up, Marmaroon with Daura, and we just walked together all the way to up Sabtiye. Sometimes we get lucky by somebody downhill would give us a ride all the way up. And sometimes we don't get lucky. We keep on climbing the hill until we get there. We didn't have money. I used to take my father's car occasionally, but I didn't have money to buy my own car. So eliminate debt. Don't live with debt. It used to be that we saved money to buy a house or an apartment. Today, we are borrowing money and we're taking those mortgages and then defaults on mortgages, whatever. I say if you have to take a debt, the only debt you would take is to buy a house. And then pay it off as quickly as possible. Try to live debt-free. Borrowing money is not good. You are not going to be able to save and get ahead of the game if you continue to be in debt. And last but not least, once you have assets to talk of, find a way to protect your assets. Because you don't want to lose your assets in case of a riot or social unrest or a loss of job or economic downturn or natural disaster or whatever it is. You want to protect your assets. So that's what I have to share with you. I just talked about, to tell you that there is no manual to tell you how do you maintain financial stability in times of a pandemic, but there is a manual to tell you how do you maintain financial stability, period, whether it's a pandemic or anything else. And the earlier we start and the earlier we plan, the more successful we can be. That's what I have to share with you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. Thank you so much for your kind advice, especially to young people. I like how you address the audience to start planning even in their teenage years. moreover during their college years. Thank you so much. Now we are going to take a few questions from the attendees. So as I mentioned, we have a few questions here. People are writing for Lebanon. For Argentina, there are 2. For Lebanon, there are 5. And then 2 general questions. So let's start with some questions for Lebanon, which I think is the big bulk of the attendees in this webinar. Let's start with this one. What key issue in Lebanon needs to be resolved in order to get the ball rolling for the IMF to be willing to provide the loans needed to rebuild the country? What is the likelihood of that happening? Dr. Philippe, what do you think?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't know about the IMF or the World Bank or any other outside supporting source. I'll stick to the first part of the question. What key issue needs to be resolved? Point. IMF or anybody else. It's an issue of trust and reliability in the successful institutions, and particularly the central bank and the commercial banking system. This appears to me at this critical time as the bottleneck to get the economy moving again. We need to rebuild trust in the liquidity and re-establish balance between cash and ledger. Basically, we have a brilliant banking system. It is coming under all sorts of attacks. It needs to be protected and saved. That's how I would address that question. It's beyond government. It's beyond recession. It's beyond the virus. It's the grease of the economy.
There was a closely linked question from another participant regarding what you just mentioned, the link to the political issues. There are no doubts that corruption and overspending of all the successive Lebanese governments have brought us to the current crisis. To what extent do you think that reforms or financial strategic planning can elevate us from this depression without any change in the political trend?
This question strikes me as a moral issue concern, much more than a practical economic or executive concern. Corruption is very relative in terms. I would like to refer to it as inefficiency of governance, leakages and shrinkages in the system. It is an inherent part of any governance system. I don't think it is the main issue to be resolved. It is an issue. It is a variable issue, a relative scale. Corruption is a relative scale. What do we call corruption? What do we call not? What is fraud? What is legitimate? What is legal? What is deceptive? It's a moral issue, much more than an economic or an administrative issue.
Thank you. Let's move now to one question for Argentina. So this will be addressed to Adrian. What is the best option to invest in Argentina right now? Should we invest or wait?
That's an interesting question. That's a question that many people is trying to figure it out right now, because you know, for you invest when you can imagine the future and you have some view of the future, and you trust what you can have in return from your investments. In Argentina right now, it's very difficult to find a safe investment. For instance, in some places, the price of the real estate went down. It had a sharp fall in prices. There are some investment in financial markets, some stocks that are cheap right now, and they have a high, and some other stocks had a very high jump in prices. But you need to first figure out what's your horizon, the time that you want to invest, the risk that you want to take. This is very important. How much risk you are able to afford, and according to those questions, you can find investments in the real market and in financial markets, and of course, according to how much money you want to invest, because you can invest with just few money in some financial products. For instance, especially there are many investments that you can make through your phone right now. You can buy or you can give money to what is called today in English is I don't remember the name in English right now. Where you put your money in a pool of people that give it for a loan, and you have a return in that loan, and that interest that you're paid, it's very high, so you have a good return in that money. But you need to look for specific investments according to the profile that you have as an investor. So it's not easy to answer that question, to say go and invest in stocks, go and invest in real estate. It depends on certain items that you need to answer first, and some questions that you need to answer, and it depends on the profile of the person, of course.
Thank you, Adrian. There are one or two questions for Dr. Joseph. The first one, is it okay to borrow to invest?
Well, the answer is yes, but it depends. So if you are borrowing money at 2% and investing and getting 7% return, then the answer is absolutely, do it every day. You have to make sure that the return on your investment is higher than the cost of capital that you are borrowing. If the answer is yes, do it. I'll invest with you also.
Thank you. Another one. It says, Dr. Joseph, what about the people who already have their savings in the Lebanese currency with the change in rates happening now? $1 equals 5,000 lira.
Yes, that sucks.
What can they do now?
Yeah, that sucks. I know this firsthand. I worked for 2 years in Qatar, in between 82 and 84, and every rial I made, I converted into lira and I put it in Bank of Beirut, in Lebanese bank. And now it's 5,000, you say. I think in my days it reached 9,000. I think back in 1984 or so, we can go back and check. I think we reached 7, 8, 9,000 lira to $1. This is not good, and there is not much you can do about it other than to diversify. However, having said that, even in Lebanon, diversification. So I have an account in Lebanon today, and my account is in US dollars. And guess what they did with my money? They froze it. I can't take anything out. But I mean, I usually put the money there. So when I go to Lebanon, I take the interest from that account and I use it as my expenses when I'm in Lebanon. A couple $1,000, they pay me interest or whatever. Now I am told even the interest I will not be able to get. And if I get it, they're going to give it to me in Lebanese lira at 3,000 exchange rate, which is I'm losing about 60–70%. Yeah, this is a problem I don't have an answer for. Philip has the answer to that one, not me.
Thank you, Joseph. Carlos, since Joseph is throwing this back my way, can I build on it?
Yes,
you are the true Lebanese, you know. I am an imposter Lebanese anymore.
See, there are two issues that are emerging from this comparative approach that we're doing, Lebanon, Argentina, Orlando, Florida. There are two issues that are becoming very severe. Issue one, and I don't know the extent in Argentina, but the Lebanese economy is super dollarized. It's very highly dollarized. And not only in US dollars, it's dollarized in any foreign currency. That makes it quite complex to compare interest rates, to compare exchange rates, to make investment decisions. So that's the first issue, particularly now that the Lebanese lira is going into a downward spiral of loss of its value in an unexpected, unprecedented way in a very short amount of time. That's the first dire dimension. The second dire dimension is that the banking system of Lebanon right now, and you use the right word, Joseph, is frozen. It's frozen, like an engine is not operating anymore. The engine is come to a complete standstill. The good news is that it's not dead yet. And there is hope to revive the banking system by reviving the trust into the liquidity and into the leverage of that system. But it is frozen. So if I've been saving money for the last 10 years or 20 years, I don't have access to it. It's gone. And the big question is, will I ever see it again? So now not only the economy is dollarized, but now beyond being dollarized, it's a cash economy. We're back to a very primitive, basic system of barter, of exchange of any system. And amidst this, we still have to worry about paying bills and rent and buying groceries and filling up gas for our car and repairing our car, etc. So the entire economy of Lebanon is freezing, which places Lebanon on a very dramatic path to disintegration and fragmentation. Beyond economic collapse, we may be seeing a social collapse and a socio-political fragmentation, which in Lebanon translates, given history, translates into disaster. And I don't want to sound dismal and negative, but it makes everyday decisions volatile and very complex. And yes, I agree with you. We don't plan for a crisis when the crisis hits. Okay, we are in the crisis. We're beyond planning. We're into last-minute adjustments and survival mechanisms. At least that's how it is in Beirut. So, what do I do with my dollars and with my Lebanese lira? I think the reaction is happening in Lebanon. We're going into a cash economy. Some sort of a cash economy.
Thank you, Philippe. I want to go back to Adrian. He wants to expand on the previous question on investing in Argentina right now, and then I have one more for him, and then we come back and finish with a couple questions for Lebanon.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Charlie. I wanted to say something, and both Rossen and Zgheib said that we need to save money. Of course, it's very important, and it depends on the political situation on every country. Of course, you will have problems with banks and etc. The number one economy in the world is United States, but they had some issues, big issues in 2008, 2009, and they lost a lot of money. People lost a lot of money. Of course, there's something that we need to know. There's no safe haven in this world. Perhaps you will invest in something that it seems that to be safe, like real estate, but prices can fall, and when you need the money, your investment worth less than what you have invested. We need to know that we live in a world that have cycles. The economy moves in cycles, and it depends when you buy, when you sell, that you will have the difference, a positive difference that goes for you, and it's your earnings, of course. But for instance, in Argentina, the government, one government some years ago said, if you bet on the dollar, you will lose. But everyone that bought dollars in Argentina, they won. As I showed you before, today we pay 71, 72 pesos for a dollar in the official market. But 2 years ago, we paid 18 pesos. So you have a devaluation that it goes more than 200% since 2018. And we have a very high inflation in the last 2 years, but it didn't reach the devaluation. So the people that bought dollars in the beginning of 2018 and have dollars today, they, of course, they won, because prices were higher, but still they are still behind the price of the dollar. So you can sell dollars in the official market, and you will still winning the inflation rate. But we have a parallel market. Every person right now that can buy dollars in Argentina are buying dollars in the official market and selling in the parallel market, because you buy at 95 pesos with 30% tax that the government is charging to the people that want to buy dollars, and you can sell the dollar in 124 right now. It's about 30 pesos more. It's almost a 30% difference, and the people is doing that because they have every month the restriction to buy $200, and you can make a 30% difference in your budget just buying and selling dollars. And you know, that's the reason why the reserves in Argentina are falling. I'm not saying this is the good way to do investments, but when you have restrictions, the motivation that you have is to go beyond the restriction, to jump the restrictions. And this is the behavior that the economy found that people have when they have many restrictions in their the liberty to manage their economy and their finances. So we will have that situations. I was caught up when in 2001 I had money in the bank, and the banks didn't give me the money. I lost a lot of money there. So there's no heaven here, safe haven. We need to find the best situation according to our reality. And sometimes if I don't know how to manage, I need to find someone that can advise me precisely, just as Dr. Rossen was advising us. I think that this is a very good advice. I do the same thing with my daughters. I have two daughters. One of them, the oldest one is 17 years old, and the other one is 14. But for about 3 or 4 years, since they were 10 and 14, 10 and 13, they are saving their money. I put some money on an account for them, but they work and they save their own money to buy their things, but they have their budget. They learn how to manage their money. And we just finished from Florida University a program that is a financial management program for people, and they had their first certificate in financial management. They just finished the last week. They finished. We made together. So they are learning how to manage their money, how to invest, how to save, how to make a budget. Just like Joseph said before, we need to begin when we're young. We need to save, we need to invest, we need to know how to make our expenses, how to buy, because it's not just going and using the credit card. And that's another thing that I wanted to say. If you have a credit card debt, the best investment that you can do right now is to pay your credit card. This is the best investment. In Argentina, as I said before, we have a 60% annual rate in interest that you pay in the credit card. If you don't pay your credit card, you're paying a 60% annual rate. In the other hand, if you put your money in a bank, you will receive a 30% annual rate. So there's a difference of 100% in both rates. So it's very important to know that when you have debt, the best investment that you can do is to cancel your debt. Unless, as Dr. Rossen said, unless this debt let you leverage your investments. And the only case is when you have debt with a very small interest rate and you can increase your investment and receive a higher interest rate. But this is not something for everyone. You need to know how to do that. So I would like to advise the people to be very careful with the way they manage their debts and they manage their investments.
Thank you, Adrian. We are going to wrap up now with the last two questions, one for Joseph, one for Philippe. Let's start with the one for Joseph. During and after the civil war in Lebanon, lots of people migrated in order to help themselves and their families in Lebanon. But nowadays, after the COVID-19, the economic situation is bad, and chances to get jobs abroad is almost null. Do you think the Lebanese diaspora can help finding jobs to our young, educated people, or do you have any other suggestion?
You know, I try to go back to Lebanon every year. I've been doing that faithfully for the past number of years. And I kept a house in Lebanon just to say I have property. And every time I go, I realize people outside want to go back and people in Lebanon want to leave. And it's amazing, the psychology, how people think. If you ask me today, I say my retirement is going to be at least 3 months in Lebanon. I can't live year round in Lebanon. I changed. I am not the same person I was 40 years ago. I'll either kill somebody or somebody will kill me if I stay longer than 3 months. I think, at least. My wife tells me that. I don't want to encourage you to think about leaving. And it's easy for me to say that, I know. And sometimes it may sound hypocrite. I may sound as a hypocrite by saying what I'm saying, because I did it. I left. My brother left. My sister left. Nobody from my family is in Lebanon anymore. I don't have any connection to the country as far as relatives. My parents passed away. I would say it's not a politically correct answer, but I would tell you, we have to build the country. We have to invest in the country. There was a time where Lebanese people left and worked in Qatar and Saudi and I don't know where else. And that's what kept the economy going in Lebanon. The transfers that people did, including myself when I was in Qatar, and even when I was here in the US, the transfers we made kept the economy going. Yesterday I was reading, I forgot his name, Mahfoud or something, his last name. He is one of the big leaders, Lebanese leaders in Africa, community leaders, that is, Lebanese community leaders in Africa. Ma'awad, I think Ma'awad is his last name. He said, and he sent a letter to Sfair. I think Sfair is the CEO of Bank of Beirut, and he is the head of the banking association. He told them, look, all these Lebanese immigrants that went to Africa 20, 30, 40 years ago, they kept Lebanon going. They transferred their money. They never kept their accounts in Africa. They sent their money to Lebanese banks. And they put all these monies in Lebanese banks, and Lebanese banks lent them to the government. And the government, God knows what they did with it. And now nobody can have access to their money. The only way we can get better in Lebanon is for Lebanese to make it better. I will not encourage you to leave, although it is easy for me to say that. And I know I'm a hypocrite for saying that, but I cannot, in clear conscience, encourage people in Lebanon to leave Lebanon. One thing I thought of while Adrian was talking, one way to protect investments in Lebanon is to have real estate. So the savings don't have to be cash savings. The savings can be property savings, land, apartments, houses, whatever. Real estate in Lebanon has never lost value. Even in the darkest days of war, real estate never lost value. It always goes up. It may go through times where the prices may be depressed and there is no buyer market and so on. But overall, over the past 100 years in Lebanon, perhaps, real estate never loses value if you stay sitting on it for a while. I hope my answer is okay with you, but I cannot in clear conscience tell you, yeah, I will help you find a job outside. It's not that easy.
We need the good, educated young people in Lebanon to stay and build up the country.
I agree. And I tell you, I'm coming back. I mean, in a couple of years, I am coming back. I'm not going to stay here. I mean, I'm not going to be buried here. I can tell you that much. I already reserved a lot next to my father and mother. I told my wife, even if you have to cremate me, just take a little jar and sprinkle it by my parents there. I'm not going to be buried here. At least I hope I won't. Anyway.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Let's finish with the question for Dr. Philippe. What is the best employment opportunity or investment in Lebanon after the lockdown? You need to unmute your microphone, Philippe. On the bottom left.
Yes. Okay. So the question is, what is the best employment opportunity or investment opportunity?
It says or. Employment or investment.
Yeah, two different things. In terms of investment, definitely entrepreneurial. Definitely innovative, entrepreneurial in the knowledge industry, in the communications industry, in the multimedia technology industry. That's in terms of investment. However, in terms of employment, that means positioning within an already existing operating industry. It seems to me that in the COVID-19 age, interestingly enough, the healthcare industry is in shortage of human capital at all stages. Medical, support, technical, administrative, executive, hospitalization, public health, etc. So in terms of direct, immediate employment positions, it looks like there is an immediate demand in either private healthcare or NGO agencies in healthcare or in public healthcare. That's the immediate demand right now. But in terms of investment, I'd like to echo what Joseph said about real estate. Historic data shows that it is true what Joseph said, that real estate market value in Lebanon in the long run has a positive trend, although at times it may look stagnant, but it rarely goes back. So an inert sort of investment would be in some form of either construction or already existing apartment, housing, infrastructure of any sort, or just empty land. Okay, that is an option. The dilemma for it right now is, would you transact this with lira, Lebanese lira, with dollar, with euro, with ledger checks, with cash? So there's an issue of transaction, no matter what the investment is, rather than the investment itself.
Thank you so much, Philippe. We need to finish the webinar here. Dr. Joseph has another appointment, and we promised it was going to be 2 hours, and it went 2 hours and 20 minutes. I want to thank each of the panelists for their effort to be here. Dr. Joseph, Dr. Philippe, Adrian, also Jessica for co-hosting this event with us. Thank you, each one of you. I want to thank also all the attendees for participating, for joining, and feel free to say a final word of farewell.
Yes, I would like to thank each and every one of you for giving us your time to talk about these interesting information. May God be with us and bless us and bless our families. Thank you for each participant too.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you for you.
Thank you all for participating. I want to promote our next webinar. We are planning a similar webinar in exactly 2 weeks on Wednesday, June 24 at the same time. The topic now, it will be the effects of the pandemic on small businesses, on small and medium-sized enterprises. So all of you, the attendees, are invited to join us in 2 weeks for this second webinar. And we are planning to continue doing more of this throughout the summer here in the Northern Hemisphere. Here, our live streaming. Thank you all for participating.